It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Terry Dolan up to the stage.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. I love the energy in the room. It's really exciting to see individuals meeting old friends, making new friends, and sharing fellowship, which is what we're all about. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here. For those of you who haven't met, my name is Terry Dolan, and I have the honor of serving as your president of the college this year. And so we have a really great day planned today, and I'm very excited about it. We have outstanding learning. We have great food. I'm excited about our lunch. You know, food's very important. We have some fun, and you have a shopping opportunity. So if you're like me, make sure you stop by, not just to fulfill your shopping needs, but also to support the American College of Dentists Foundation. And those funds then help build programs for our future. So thank you for that, and you can have some fun doing that as well. So last year in my president's address, I spoke about passion, purpose, and the small things in life. And my hope and my intention was that we encourage each other to do more and do better, and to recognize that meaning and value exist in the small everyday activities and interactions. And one of the people who lives this every day and has been a great encourager of mine is our president-elect, Dr. Bob Fiala. I know many of you know Bob. He's an exceptional leader in dentistry, a private practice clinician, and he is a leader in the ongoing development of AI in healthcare, so one of my AI colleagues, and a past president of the American Dental Association. He served the ACD in several roles already, as an at-large regent, as treasurer, as vice president, and president-elect, and we're very thrilled to hear his address today, and as he begins his service on Friday as our president for 2025. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bob Fiala.
Well, good morning, everyone. You know, when you stand here behind a podium for the first time and you're the only one on the stage, it's distinctly solitary. So let's put it that way. It's my privilege to be here, and ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and most importantly, new inductees and fellows. It's a great privilege to stand before you today as we celebrate our remarkable achievements and welcome the new fellows to the college. And not just about honoring their work and how they came here, but also embracing the new responsibilities that come with that responsibility and distinction. All the new fellows are stepping into a new role. It demands leadership. It's not just their own careers, but it's all within the entire healthcare profession that they will exert their leadership and their ethical intent. We find ourselves at a time where healthcare is undergoing a significant transformation. Rising student debt, corporate production pressures, and economic uncertainties present unique challenges to the clinicians. Yet within these challenges lie the opportunities for all of us, opportunities to lead, to shape the future of our profession, and to build a lasting legacy grounded in excellence, ethics, and service. Technology is an underpinning. It's not an industry of its own, but it's part of every industry. It's intended to increase productivity at scale and to make our lives better. The expanding use of artificial intelligence in the profession has absolute potential to be transformative and significant. But is it consequential? Potentially, which is why there must be a standard and there must be regulatory oversight as well. AI has the likelihood of being the greatest impact on medical-dental integration, perhaps, and to comb through the figurative haystack of metrics gathered on systemic non-communicable diseases, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, pulmonary disease, and to tease out the relevant influences on logistic regression and predictive analytics. We need to develop leaders in this area. Clinicians with a measure of emotional intelligence and self-awareness bring a set of credible things that can create exceptional leaders. We do everything in teams. We value process, but we hold ourselves accountable. And we make difficult decisions, sometimes with incomplete information. At the heart of the leadership in healthcare is one indispensable element: trust. Whether it's trust between the clinician and the patient, or trust between colleagues and teams, it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. It's easy to take it for granted. Once it's lost, trust is exceedingly difficult to regain. That's why ethical leadership is so critically vital to our profession particularly. It protects that trust. As leaders, we are responsible for not only maintaining that trust, but for nurturing it, for the reinforcement with it, with every patient interaction and every decision we make. But leadership is not just about the visible acts of decision-making and policy decisions. It's about the quiet, powerful role of mentorship. Mentorship brought each one of us to this table. Mentorship is not only about passing on knowledge, it's about shaping mindsets. Through mentorship, you're not just teaching clinical skills or explaining protocols, you're instilling values. We're showing others how to remain ethical under pressure and to balance competing priorities and how to prioritize the well-being of patients above all else. The silent importance of mentorship lies in its ability to cultivate future leaders who will uphold the same values that brought them to this moment today. It is through mentorship that we guide the next generation, helping them navigate the same challenges we faced and empowering them to lead with integrity, resilience, and compassion. Mentorship is not simply about passing the knowledge, it's about shaping mindsets. I was inducted as a fellow in this town 30 years ago this year. My mentor, Tom Winkler, who you may remember, who passed away, I remember his last day leading his last year as a leader, as the president of this college. He came here under significant duress. He was not feeling well. He was going through chemotherapy. He was working hard on his health, but he came here because he had commitment. He was a leader. Most of all, he was a mentor. He was the kind of person that never took credit for anything one of his mentees did, but he stood to the sideline, looking and applauding their achievements, never thinking once about what role he had played. That's the kind of mentor that I want to be. That's the kind of mentor I hope everyone can be. The silent importance of mentorship lies in its ability to cultivate future leaders who will uphold the same values that brought them to this moment, as I mentioned. In addition to mentorship, it is equally important to recognize that the power of followership developed by Robert Kelly at Carnegie Mellon University. Often, leadership is glorified as the pinnacle of success. But Kelly's work reminds us that followership is more than just compliance. It's about active, engaged participation. Effective followers are critical thinkers who bring their full selves to the role, supporting their leaders with loyalty, but also with feedback and accountability. As patient outcomes rely on the team-based approach, the power of followership becomes even more apparent. The best leaders are those who recognize the value of contributions of their teams. They understand that success is not achieved by one person at the top, but also the collective efforts of others, where each member plays a crucial role. This relationship between leadership and followership creates an environment where innovation can thrive and where trust between all team members can be cultivated and sustained. As we all stepped into this role as leaders and mentors, I urge everyone who is a new fellow to embrace the model of ethically driven leadership, one that Roger Martin refers to as integrative thinking in his article on how leaders think in Harvard Business Review. You could look that up. It's a great article. Integrative thinking is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind and still find a way to resolve them in a way that creates value. In the complex world of healthcare, pardon me, this skill is invaluable. Every day, We face decisions that demand we balance patient care with financial realities, clinical efficacy with personal empathy, or organizational goals with ethical standards. Integrative thinkers don't settle for either-or choices. Instead, they look to creative solutions that transcend these dilemmas. It means finding solutions that are not only clinically sound, but also ethically robust. Solutions that embrace trust with patients, staff, and the healthcare system in general. As leaders, our ability to adopt this approach will set us apart, allowing us not only to make better decisions, but also to model a style of leadership that others will want to follow. Now, that brings us back to the central theme, trust. Trust is the glue that holds everything together with respect to healthcare. Patients entrust us with their lives, or their mouths, their overall health, and also at their most vulnerable moments. They trust that not only will be the experts in our field, but also to act with integrity, to communicate openly, and to place their well-being above all else. Our ability to make decisions guided by ethics and integrative thinking strengthens that trust. But trust is fragile. A single lapse in judgment, a moment of miscommunication, or an ethical compromise can break that bond that took years to build. Once lost, trust is incredibly difficult to regain. So when patients feel that their trust has been violated, they disengage, sometimes delaying care, sometimes refusing it altogether. The same is true within teams. When trust breaks down among colleagues, collaboration falls, innovation slows, and the overall quality of care diminishes. I had a patient that came in last week. He was 60 years old. His mother is 83. She's been my patient for the last 30 years. Lovely woman. He really didn't follow up with dental care very much, but he wound up going back and he met a new young clinician who he really engaged with. And he came in, he was very soft-spoken. And he said, you know, I really feel, I'm here. I said, well, what brought you here? He said, well, I was referred to another periodontist, but before so, I'm a periodontist. Happily so. But, because I can't do all the things that you do. You know, this is something different. So anyway, what happens is he came in and he said, you know, we had this wonderful relationship, wonderful discussion. I really trusted her. And then she said, I think we'll have to take all your maxillary teeth out. I'm going to refer you to a periodontist for bone grafting and then implant placement. We're going to do a reconstruction with a palataless denture. He said, well, what else can I do? She said, well, I really don't think there's anything else. Why don't you see the periodontist? So he went to this periodontist. And unfortunately, the periodontist said, well, we have two choices. We can take your teeth out, we can graft the bone, we can place 4 to 6 implants, we can reconstruct the maxillary arch. Or you can have a denture. He said, is there any way I can save my teeth in some way? He said, no, those are the options. So he was telling his mother this, and his mother said, well, why don't you go to see Dr. Fayella? So he came over to see me, and we had a conversation. And he's very wistful. And you know, we had a long conversation because we treat people, not patients. And the more we listen, the better we are. So he said to me, you know, and the one thing that really struck me is at the end of it, he said, I really had this great relationship. She was really great. She explained everything. But he said, she gave up on me. He didn't say she gave up on my teeth. He said she gave up on me. It's our responsibility to protect that trust. Every decision we make, every action we take, must reinforce the trust our patients and our teams place in us. It's not just about avoiding mistakes. It's about actively nurturing the culture of trust where transparency, honesty, and ethical behavior is the norm. As fellows of the college, we are the stewards of these principles. To our new fellows, you're not only being recognized for your past achievements, but entrusted with the future of our profession. Our new fellows, they have the opportunity and the obligation to lead with integrity, to mentor others, to foster strong followership, and to think in ways that protect the delicate fabric of trust that's essential in dentistry and in all of healthcare. I encourage everyone, all of us in this room, to embrace the pillars of this society: ethics, excellence, professionalism, and leadership. Not only for guideposts, but also as tools to empower others. As you mentor the next generation of clinicians, remember that your influence extends far beyond your individual actions. You're shaping the future of leaders in healthcare, and through them, you will have a lasting impact on our profession. As you lead your teams, value their contributions and recognize the importance of their followership. Cultivate the culture where everyone feels valued, where their voices are heard, and where their trust is built through mutual respect and shared goals. Remember that strong leaders are also strong followers. We all started that way, willing to listen, willing to learn, and willing to adapt. And as we face the inevitable challenges in dentistry and in healthcare in general, whether they are economic pressures, ethical dilemmas, or complex decision-making, embrace the power of integrative thinking. Find that solution that's hidden. Find solutions that align with your values, that strengthen the trust between you and your patients, and that elevate the standard of care for everyone. In closing, I want to just say that this is one thought that I really treasure. Leadership is not about the position you hold, it's about the influence you have. It's about the trust you build, the mentorship you offer, the ethical decisions you make when no one is watching. You've earned your place in the college through hard work, we all have, and dedication to the profession, but the journey is far from over. In fact, it just begins when you become a member of the college, a fellow of the college. As you move forward from this moment, remember that you're all now the standard bearers for the profession. And the ones who will set the tone for that, what means to be excellence, to serve with integrity, and to inspire trust in those around you. Congratulations to all the new fellows on this remarkable achievement. I hope you continue to lead with purpose, inspire others with your actions, and build a legacy of trust, ethics, and excellence in all that you do in your profession. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
You nearly stole the script. Thank you, Dr. Fayella, for your inspiring remarks. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the annual Fellows Forum. I'm Robert Lamb, president of the ACD Foundation. One of the many ways the ACD Foundation supports the mission of the college is providing funding for our continuing education programs, including the Fellows Forum. Our continuing education verification partner is the Academy of General Dentistry. In addition to our partnership through the PACE program, the ACD provides ethics articles for AGD's publication, AGD Impact, written by members of the American Society for Dental Ethics section. I am happy to welcome their president and fellow of the college, Dr. Merlin Omer. Come on up. Dr. Omer, on behalf of the American College of Dentists and the ACD Foundation, we thank the ACD for their years of partnership and friendship.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So a few weeks ago, when they asked me, says, hey, you're going to be in New Orleans for SmileCon. Can you stop in and say a few words to a real small group at the ACD in the morning? So look out here, this isn't a real small group, but that's okay. I'm really delighted, honored to be here with you folks, with the American College of Dentists. And I grew up about 60 miles southwest of New Orleans and went to dental school about 6 miles from here at LSU. So this is like a homecoming for me. It feels great to be back home where I grew up and where I spent a lot of my youth. Right now I live in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. This is a little loud. Jacksonville Beach, Florida, is that better? I'm not screaming? Okay. And after spending 30 years in the Navy, traveling around the country, so had a great career, private practice in Baton Rouge, went into the Navy, then opened a private practice after I retired from the Navy, and then I have this position with the ACD that's going to end in 5 weeks. So I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do with myself and what I'm going to do for a third or fourth different career. Because it's been a long but fun road. I graduated 45 years ago from dental school. So in fact, Saturday evening we're having our 45th class reunion. A big accomplishment, big step. So, Terry, when she was up here, mentioned fun and food. New Orleans is a great place for food, let me tell you. But the fun part is very, very important to our lives. We lead a very stressful life at times, practicing dentistry, taking care of patients, taking care of the people. And our work is on the sub-millimeter level of perfection. So the fun part is really, really important when you're at an event or at home. Make sure you incorporate the fun in your life. Because remember, too, it's the simple things that can bring us joy. So remember that as your journey in dentistry and life after dentistry goes on, remember the fun and the simple things. So today's recognition is all about your success and your profound commitment to advancing the highest ideals of dentistry, excellence, ethics, professionalism, and service. Ethics at the forefront of the ACD. It's essential as ever in today's ever-changing world and the profound changes in dentistry. In a world where production and the bottom line are emphasized too frequently, imparting a deep-rooted sense of ethics is paramount. Part of being a doctor and a professional is being honest and ethical in the care we provide in our interactions with our patients, staff, and colleagues. And these values are embodied by this organization and the 280-ish members who are being honored today and inducted into the college. So on behalf of the Academy of General Dentistry, I celebrate your success and congratulate you on this enormous achievement. I'm confident your passion will continue to inspire the next generation of dental professionals. When I was elected vice president in 2021 and followed the path that I'm on now, throughout my tenure in these roles, I've tried to emphasize the value of being in organized dentistry, whatever group that you're in. The Academy of General Dentistry, the ACD, Pierre Fauchard, ICD, the ADA, whatever it is, organized dentistry is a valuable piece of the profession because this is our opportunity to, most people practice in a very small group, and this is our opportunity to get out, network with our colleagues, network with other professionals, other doctors, share stories, and build a bigger sense of self-worth and worth for the profession. So in today's world, being a good dentist is not enough. So many forces shape how we practice, things that we often don't have time to focus on while we're caring for patients. And again, another reason for organized dentistry and the ACD and the AGD are what we do here makes a difference. And whatever it is, whatever piece that we do, it makes a difference in the lives, our lives and the lives of our family and patients. And also, it gives us a collective voice, because without this collective voice, we risk having others make the decisions for us that could negatively impact us and our patients. Seeing all of you here reminds me of the strength and unity of our community. Being part of this provides an opportunity to not only honor individuals who have made exceptional contributions in the field, like all of you, but also to reaffirm our shared mission to advance oral health and improve the well-being of the patients and communities we serve. As dental professionals, we understand that excellence is not achieved in isolation. To advance our profession, it takes a community committed to continuous learning, collaboration, and service. The Academy of General Dentistry and the American College of Dentists have demonstrated these principles through their shared work, and we couldn't be prouder of this partnership. We amplify our impact and inspire each other to set even higher standards for care in the profession. So in closing, I just want to remind everyone that if you're looking for a destination, CE event or just a destination and do a little bit of education along with it, the AGD's having their scientific session in 9 through 12 July in Montreal this next year. So if you feel like you want a trip in July to Montreal and get a little CE, have fun, and network with some of the other dentists in organized dentistry, the AGD is a great place to do it. Again, thanks for this opportunity. Thank you for your everything that you do for the profession of dentistry and for inviting me here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Omer. The Fellows Forum is our traditional time to gather to discuss big issues facing the profession and to consider the role of the college in the context of that issue. Our topic today is the dark side of leadership, and we bring this to you as part of our renewed focus on building leadership capacity across our organization. In the spring of this year, the ACD hosted our first Shaping the Future, or SHIFT Leadership Institute, and emerging leaders of our sections and regencies attended this event. And the response for this event was overwhelmingly positive, and we are hosting a second event in the spring of 2025. Dr. Sri Koka facilitated the SHIFT Leadership Institute and will moderate today's panel. Dr. Sri Koka received his DDS and MS degree from the University of Michigan. He joined the University of Nebraska faculty in 1992, became a diplomat of the American Board of Prosthodontists in 1995, and received his PhD in oral biology from the University of Nebraska in 1999. Dr. Koka then received his MBA from MIT Sloan School of Management in 2013, and he most recently served as Dean of the University of Mississippi School of Dentistry. Dr. Koka has published over 115 journal articles and book chapters and lectures nationally and internationally. Today, he has brought in experienced leaders willing to share their journeys to begin this conversation among us, the fellows. Dr. Koka, please introduce your topic and our panel. Thank you.
It is a privilege to have the opportunity to be up here and speak to you all on a really tough topic, the dark side of leadership. All of you are leaders. You wouldn't be in this room if you didn't have service as a core value, and that can be really daunting. A couple of quotes I'd like to start the morning with. I was fortunate enough to become chair of dental specialties at the Mayo Clinic in 2007. And at the new chair orientation workshop, the CEO of Mayo at the time, Dennis Denny said to us, "You don't want to hear this, but in my experience, the best leaders feel responsible for everybody and everything." And that is a daunting role to play. And yet, that's what running a practice, being a parent, it's all leadership, right? The second quote is from the US Navy SEALs, where they said, "The only easy day was yesterday." And there's a lot of truth to that. When I first took on leadership roles, I thought, I'll assess the situation, I'll take care of this problem, I'll take care of that problem, and then things will calm down. Well, they never calm down. And one of the reasons they don't calm down is you care. If you care about making your team better and achieving your mission, then there is always work to do. So I'm very grateful to have three fantastic colleagues with me today. Each of them chose a portion of this big canvas of the dark side of leadership to share with you. We're all experienced speakers, but nevertheless, whenever you give a presentation for the first time, there's always a few jitters. And for each of us, this is the first time we're giving the presentation that you're hearing today. So please give us feedback afterwards on content and delivery. We've initially set this up so that there's lots of time for Q&A, because this is an emotional topic. We want to take you to places that you don't normally go to at meetings, where you're willing to kind of be vulnerable, open up, because in doing so, then we help each other. And that's what this college is about. So thank you for being here, and it's my pleasure now to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Stephen Prosciutto.
So I'm gonna come down and walk amongst you all, if that's okay. That's my style. Remember, he said that we're gonna want feedback on two things: one, content, and then delivery. So even if the content's bad, give us at least a 5 or 6 on delivery. So I'm gonna kind of scene set the conversation today, and by that I mean we've all worked for somebody. We all work for somebody. There are those leaders out there that you say, wow, they did an amazing job with that particular issue, whatever that particular issue was. And there's leaders out there that we've worked for that we says, oh my goodness, I am never, ever going to do what they did. So let's start out with the concept that it is an honor and a pleasure to serve as a leader. And leadership is about one thing, and that is service. Okay? The obligatory disclaimer slide, these are my thoughts, not of the Navy, not of West Virginia University, not of the School of Dentistry, or the state of West Virginia. So, I want to talk just a little bit about leadership styles, because we want to build, each presentation build just a little bit on the other presentation. So there's about 8 styles, I think, that most folks recognize, and they're all just a little bit different. And I will begin by saying that they all are appropriate leadership styles in certain situations. The challenge becomes recognizing the situation that we use the leadership style in. So participative, right? Democratic. That's the one that everybody likes, right? Everybody's involved in the decision. Everybody has a role to play in the conversation. They feel like they're part of the team. There are disadvantages to that as well. So when you think about it, what could be wrong with involving everybody in the decision? Every member of the team is a part of it. It takes forever sometimes. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. It takes forever to get some sort of consensus approval. It is by far one of the more ideal styles. Everybody's part, everybody feels valued, everybody has contributions, but to get to some sort of a decision in the end is really challenging. Authoritarian. I will say I've used every one of these at different times in my career, both with 30 plus years in the Navy and then the last 3 plus years as a dean. Authoritarian. That one is probably the most challenging. When would we use an authoritarian leadership style? When we don't have a whole lot of time to staff and we need to make a decision pretty quick and it's very directional. The problem with authoritarian is it disenfranchises the entire team. They don't feel like they're part of it. They feel like the leader has an agenda and it's going to be the leader's way or the highway. Delegative. This is one of my favorites, actually. I'm a pretty hands-off dean. I try to be. It doesn't work sometimes. But I always feel that you build the right team and you empower the team, delegate it and let them do it. They know their jobs a whole lot better than I do. All right? What do I know about running a periodontics department? I'm not a periodontist. All right? I know when one's working and when one's not. So the delegative role is, I think, a very useful role depending on the leader. What does delegative require the organization to do? Those people that you delegate to need to have the knowledge on what they're doing. So if you've got if everybody on the team is, hitting at 100%, delegation works pretty well. But there's folks on the team that may not be at that level yet, so you've got to bring them up to the level where they can be successful. So transactional, that's the classic, you do this for me, I'll do that for you, right? And, whether it's pay, whether it's time off, whether it's a different product, transactional is a style. I'm not a fan of that, I don't use it, but, money motivates, right? Pace setting. Pace setting is an interesting style of leadership. That's where you're down there actually in the trenches working. Think of the manager that's got to put 150 packages out by the end of the day, and they're all in their packaging. And the pace setter leader gets in there, and they're doing all of the loading the boxes and packing, and it works. Very short term. Very short term. Everybody burns out pretty quick. Coaching. I love a coaching leadership style, right? You develop the team. You develop individual members of the team. So what's the challenge with the coaching leadership style? You lose sight of the big picture and you're focused on that one individual person and helping that one individual or two individual people be successful. So coaching is another good style. You're developing talent. Affiliative or facultative, that's the one that you're focused on the well-being of everyone. Sounds like a perfect ideal model, doesn't it? Everyone on the team, you want them to feel good. You want them to do well. You want them to be successful. So when you have too much facilitative leadership style, how can there be too much, right? You lose sight of the big picture. And it's an all feel good environment. I like that. I like for folks to feel good. But you can really struggle with what is our main mission and what's the end point for that? Transformational. I love this. All right, this is kind of the other sweet spot for me. And when I was a middle manager, clinic director, department head in a hospital, I wasn't a transformational thinker. As a dean and as an admiral, I was a transformational thinker. Right? You got to think big picture, and you got to have the team, and you got to value the team. So I love the transformational leadership thought and philosophy. It's very hard to do. So a couple other points. Servant leadership. Wow, we love servant leadership. When people ask me, even throughout my military career, what kind of a leader are you? I like to think I'm a servant leader, right? We're here to serve. Leadership is about service. It is never, ever about self. The instant that leadership becomes about the leader and not about the organization and not about the success of the mission, you've lost it. And oh, by the way, every single person in your organization knows that instant that it became about you and not about the mission and not about the organization. So again, servant leadership is really empowering the team. It encourages diversity of thought, this culture of trust. I've heard it 3 times since I've been here. What's the one thing that when you lose, you can't get back? Trust. It is very hard. And that is why, in one of my past organizations, when you lose confidence and you lose trust, we change the leader because you can't get it back. And the mission is too important. So, servant leadership is really, my personal goal. But as I said, remember all those other styles. Sometimes you got to be authoritarian. Very rarely, very short, very narrow. Democracy in leadership is team building in leadership is really, really one of the better ways to do it. But it's hard because of the time it takes. So you got to balance it. So situational leadership, and that's what I'm getting to here. So with situational leadership, no one style. The 8 I mentioned before, plus servant leadership. No one style works in every situation. So the successful leader knows when to tease out which style and use that style appropriately for their organization. Situational leadership is really kind of the pinnacle, if you will, in my estimation, again, shooter's perspective, is really the pinnacle of a successful leader. Because there's days that I come in and I sit and go, boy, this is something that we can work as a group, we can work as an organization, we'll get to yes and everybody will feel good. And there's other days I come in and go, don't have the time for it, this is going to be a unilateral decision, whether it's a commanding officer decision when I was serving as a commanding officer of a hospital, or whether I was serving as a flag officer or the Navy staff. Those, sometimes you just got to make those decisions and live with the fallout from it. So know yourself. It's important that you know yourself, know where you're comfortable. Do not try to be somebody you're not. All right? Be comfortable with your style, understand your style, understand what you do and how it works, because no one knows it better than you do. So, this is why I talk about that developing signature leadership style, right? I like to build consensus in the organization. That's my happy sweet spot. The bottom line takeaway here, build your toolkit. Put a lot of stuff in the toolkit. It's hard when you're 25 or 30 in your first practice or in your first job. By the time you're 35 or 40 or 45 or 50 or 65, it really, you got a lot of tools in the kit, right? Hopefully you can pick the right tool out of the kit and tailor that tool to the needs of your organization at that particular time. So I'm going to close here in just a second. I want to toss up just a couple of personal read lists. 50% of the people, 60% of the people in this room have probably read 50% of those books, right? They're the classics. Built to Last, Good to Great, Leading Change, Execution, Our Iceberg is Melting. Has anybody read that one? That one's kind of cool. It's like real small. You can read it in 30 minutes, literally 30 minutes. But there's a good moral in that story. The classic Dale Carnegie, from 1936, 90 years ago, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Leadership is not about winning friends, all right? Because there's some folks that, when you walk into a new job and you think of something, they're going to say, 25% of the people are going to agree with you no matter what you do. 25% of people are going to disagree with you no matter whatever you do. It's that 50% in the middle, right? And you try to get as much of that 50% in the middle to yes as you can. First 90 Days, that's an interesting book. Anybody read First 90 Days? I read that thing 3 times. 3 times. I read it when I was going into my first battalion, dental battalion command tour in 2004. I read it when I was going into a hospital command tour in 2010. And I read it when I was going into the dean's job at West Virginia. Bottom line takeaway on that one, you got about 3 months to assess and analyze your organization. Because after that, you're part of the organization and you don't see those things that you see when you come in new to an organization. You don't have to affect the change in that 90 days. But you do have to be able to take notes where they're at and where they need to go. One more here, a couple others. Now this list is some of my favorite. They're little newer books, if you will. Simon Sinek, obviously, Start With Why. What's your purpose? Why? Why are we doing what we're doing? What are we here to do today? Team of Teams. That is a really good book for higher education. All right? Stan McChrystal wrote the book. You may remember he was the leader of the Joint Special Operations Command in Afghanistan and later the overall leader of forces in Afghanistan. Team of Teams. By joint, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, all bring teams to the fight. They bring teams of teams themselves. They have intel, they have operations, they have logistics. So you've got some of the best in each team. And then you got a bigger team, and then you got a bigger team. Putting all of those together in a room and trying to get consensus is really, really hard. McChrystal defines it really well. So looking at my dean job, Gina, don't take this back now. You've got all of the different departments, all of the different chairs, who are the smartest people in the room in their particular area. And you have to build those teams for the good of the organization. You have to value what each team brings. And then you have to get all the teams together. So Team of Teams is a great book. The 5 Dysfunctions, lack of trust, number 1. Once you lose that trust, you never get it back. Crucial Conversations. If there's an area of leadership I fail at, it's being able to have those really tough conversations with people when they need to have them. Because it's uncomfortable for me, it's uncomfortable for the team, but it's one of the most important things that you do. So when I got to have those, I really prepare well. I dread them, I get through with them, and I feel so much better. You can't put it off forever. So Crucial Conversations is a good one. Ambitious, that was an interesting one that I had just recently read. It's about, ego and ambition. Again, once it becomes about you and your ego in a leadership role, you've lost it, and everyone knows it. Stillness is the key, bonus, hashtag. That's personal, mind, body, and soul. It's finding that time in our busy days to have an opportunity to find quiet time, develop yourself. I got it, Sri. Thoughts for the panel discussion. The greatest risks to a leader's effectiveness and thus their tenure is hubris, arrogance. And that is followed very closely by a personal core value failure. Personal core value failures can be ethical, improper relationships with people on your staff, can be illegal. Financial is a big slippery slope. So that's the thoughts that I'm going to toss out for our conversation today. And glad to be here. My most recent book, right? Anybody read that? Fearless Success, Beyond High Performance, John Foley. Everybody can answer this except Merlin. What is that the motto of? Glad to be here. Navy Blue Angels. Glad to be here. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to the questions. The money part of this presentation is the round table.
Thanks, Sri. Thank you. So I'm going to start calling him Preacher Prosciutto from now on. But the irony is our next speaker actually is a preacher, so Carlos, take it away.
All right, good morning, everybody. So this is exciting, right? We get to talk about leadership. We get to talk about how this was presented to us as panelists was they wanted us to talk about what keeps us up at night, right? So I really enjoy sleep. So there's not much that keeps me up outside of my 3 girls that are at home. But yeah, so just keep that in the back of your mind as we think about what I'm going to talk about is the concept of moral distress. So I'm going to tell a quick story. I've been in practice about 18 years, so I'm not a newbie, but I'm not as seasoned as some of you in the room, right? I can remember when I first started practicing, I was doing locum tenens in North Carolina, right? So temp dentistry, right? Almost like a substitute teacher. You're filling in for somebody on maternity leave or jury duty or whatever. And it just so happened I worked in what was mostly a pediatric office. And then I guess they liked me, the patients liked me. So then I started working there just on Fridays. I had a regular job the other days. And so this is before kids, before being married. So, you know, your time is actually your own. So I worked. And what was interesting about that practice, I'll set the stage ethically. It was owned by a pediatric dentist, but the owner employed lots of general dentists, right? So one of the questions that I wrestled with was, do the patients really know I'm not a pediatric dentist? It doesn't seem billed that way, right? We walk through the nuances of legalities and they advertise as general dentistry for children, so they don't advertise as a specialist practice, so that checks their legal box, if you will. But ethically, it still felt a little bit ambiguous to me. And remember, I'm brand new out. So it's like, you know, this seems like a slippery slope. Then it's one of those offices where often you're doing the work, but you didn't do the treatment plan. Right? You didn't do the triaging, you didn't do the comprehensive exam. Literally, I'll never forget rounding the operatory, and the young patient was already in the chair, topical in place. You know, I don't know the patient's name, I don't know anything, and it was just very uncomfortable to me, right? But I'm new. I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know if I should just walk away from this. I want to make some money. I've been in school all these years. What do I do with this? I had a little patient, and he was a boy about 8 or 10 years old. I don't remember, but he was fairly obese. You could tell that, you know, there was something going on, and we were going to do nitrous, and most of the patient population was exclusively Spanish speaking. And so my Spanish is conversational at best, right? And so I asked the mom, you're going through these questions about nitrous. I asked the mom, well, when is the last time the child vomited or threw up? And she said, every day. And I thought, I don't think my Spanish is that bad, but I can't possibly be understanding this correctly. And so I asked again, and she replied every day. And so I said, well, go get like someone from the front desk or someone who this is their vernacular. This is because I'm clearly not understanding this correctly. And then they had the conversation. They said, no, he throws up every day. And so I said, well, he shouldn't be throwing up every day. So walk me through, like, have you had a pediatrician visit? Like, walk me through, like, what's going on? And the parents seemed alarmed that I was concerned, right? It didn't seem like an issue of neglect or anything like that. They seemed generally alarmed that I was expressing concern about this. So fast forward, we do a treatment plan. I come back, and the little boy likes me, right? Like, I'm Dr. Carlos, like, it's fun, like, we're high-fiving, all that good stuff. He comes back for the treatment. Like, we did a treatment plan that day. He comes back, and I mean, it is like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I can't get a word out of him. He's just staring me down. And I'm like, yo, I'm Dr. Carlos, remember? Like, we were friends like 2 weeks ago. Get nothing. And finally he says, it's your fault. And I said, what's my fault? He said, I can't eat as much as I want to anymore. So he was the oldest of about 4 children. You had 2 parents working multiple jobs, multiple shifts. Because he was the oldest, they kind of just left him to his devices, and he was literally eating to his heart's content until he threw up every day. And so that was the moment for me that I said, I got to get out of this. This is not the practice environment for me. Even though you might say, oh, well, you made a difference, there was something in me that was kind of distressed by this whole sort of factory environment, and I can't really talk to the patient. I don't know what to do. And so because it wasn't really my permanent job, I stepped away, right? So I was able to make that decision. But we're not always in the position to speak up or leave, or there's some kind of tension that exists between what we know to do and what we're able to do, right? And so that's moral distress, right? So let's think about leadership, which we've level set pretty good on that. The only thing I would add to that, I think it's very important when we think about leadership that not be tethered to positionality, right? Just because you have a title doesn't mean you practice leadership well. And that's intentional. Because leadership is a practice. Just like we practice dentistry, we practice dental hygiene, we actually practice leadership. And we may practice it well, or we may practice it poorly, right? So that's important to realize, and that's a level set for me when I think about leadership as not tethered to positionality, which means that from whatever position someone holds, they can practice leadership, right? So our dental assistants can practice leadership, right? Our front office staff can practice leadership. Our patients can practice leadership, right? It's not about the position, and that's important for us to understand. For those of you in academics, you might be familiar with this book that I'm going to reference, Reframing Academic Leadership. I think it's one of the, even though it's academically focused, I think it has a lot of great application-based principles for general leadership, right? And some of the things that I think are important, it talks about the fact that leadership success can be traced to the choices we make, right? So that sounds very similar to ethics, which is all about our choices, both individually and collectively, right? How well one practices leadership is linked to one's ethical sensibilities and foundation. So what is your moral compass? That should be guiding you in your leadership decisions and in your leadership practice. Leaders make better choices when they are mindful about their own thought processes and actions. Emotional intelligence was already referenced this morning. Why do you make the decisions you make? Why do you think the way you do? What are your triggers, both positive and negative? Why do things that make you angry, right? So in order to practice leadership well, you've got to know those things about yourself, right? It also requires that we break out of our comfort zones and step away from crowds and seeking various options where we might propose new explanations or test alternative responses. And of course, we've all worked in environments where we're free to do those things, right? That's sarcasm there, if you're not catching that, right? Unfortunately, the environments we may work in or practice in, if we're not necessarily the final decision maker or the key decision maker, there may be forces, there may be tensions, there may be things we have to negotiate and navigate to get to the decision that we think is best, right? So let's talk about this concept of moral distress a little bit more, right? What do we do when value conflicts arise? Something in my practice, something in the school, something in the military organization, something in the DSO, something in the organized dentistry realm. It arises, but this conflicts with who I know myself to be or who I know my values are, right? What do we do when those tensions arise? Right? And that is moral distress. So it has been defined as knowing the ethically correct thing to do, but feeling unable to act. So my ethics is telling me one thing, but I feel like I can't actually act on what I feel like I know to be right, right? This is a little different than moral injury. For some of you who might really be into this kind of thing, moral injury is a little bit more related to almost like PTSD and like an actual event that occurs that triggers this inaction. But generally speaking, moral distress is looking at, I know what's right to do, or I think I know what's right to do, but I'm inhibited from that action for a myriad of reasons, right? So it's curious, because I think we all have found ourselves in that place before, if we're honest, right? If we're going to be transparent and have a real conversation and kind of lower our shoulders and act like we don't know everything and we don't have it all together and we haven't dotted every I and crossed every T every opportunity we had, right? There are times when what we feel is right is opposite of what we have the ability to do. So if we look at a historical glimpse, a professor by the name of Andrew Jameton kind of coined this phrase, really looking at nursing and the experience of knowing the right thing to do while being in a situation in which it is nearly impossible to do so. So they've described it in physicians, physiotherapists, nurses, social workers, pharmacists, dentists, almost any helping profession, any healthcare profession, right? And let's think about this. This is important because the modality of care delivery is evolving. The modality of care delivery is changing. We're really moving beyond the days where you had a single decision maker being able to run everything that happens within a practice, right? That doesn't make one bad, good, or the other. I want to be clear on that, right? But it does beg the question, what do I do if I feel like I'm under constraints that don't allow me to make the most ethical decision, right? Is everybody tracking with me on that? So that's important for us to realize, and I feel like this is a really present issue and a growing issue that we see in dentistry today, right? So research suggests that acting against one's conscience at work can have a number of serious consequences for individuals and the organization. So what happens if I'm constantly in this tension-filled place where I feel like I want to make one decision, but the organization doesn't allow me to make that ethical or most ethical choice, right? So something called compassion fatigue or burnout, right? Especially post-COVID, we've heard lots about burnout, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second, but compassion fatigue and burnout among healthcare personnel, a decrease in an individual's empathy, where we might begin avoiding or even withdrawing from patients because of this sort of burden and tension, right? A decrease in service quality in terms of patient safety, patient experience, effectiveness of care, decreases in general staff health and well-being with high staff turnover. Nobody knows about high staff turnover rates, right? Staff shortages. Could it be that some of the shortages in workforce issues we're wrestling with right now is because people feel like they can't act in the way they know that they should because of these other forces or how the system operates within the organization? Again, a majority of the work has been focused on nurses in acute care situations, but it's really applicable across other healthcare professions and ideals, right? If you've ever seen me present, you may have seen this slide before. It's one of my favorite slides from the National Academy of Medicine because it gets at the heart of what I think is so challenging, but also a rich opportunity that we have before us, right? When we think about the well-being of ourselves as the healthcare workforce, right? How do we ensure that we're okay? How do we ensure that we don't burn out? How do we ensure that we're able to offer our best to our patients, right? And so what's really key for me is right in the center, if you can see that, it says patient well-being. So the goal is optimal patient outcomes, right? This is not pure self-interest, right? Because what is that patient outcome predicated upon? The relationship we have with the patient, right? So in the center is patient well-being. Then we have the clinician-patient relationship. Well, what does that hinge upon? Are we all right? Like, how are we doing, right? So the clinician well-being, and then all of these factors, if we're honest, that affect how we show up each and every day. That 12DO is going to be there, right? That crown prep is going to be there. We'll use our iTero scanner, like all that's going to be there, but how we show up in the space can change. And what affects that? All of these factors, like rules and regulations, society and culture, organizational factors, the learning or practice environment, the responsibilities you have on the healthcare team, your competence level, your skills, your abilities, and then personal factors, right? Like, God forbid, you're caring for an aging parent and you're in the middle of a procedure and your front desk comes and says, you know, your 95-year-old mother has had a fall. That changes your mindset, right? So how do we still cope with that? How do we still move forward? And I think this is an important thing that we have to really recognize as a part of ethically centered leadership is combating this moral distress that all of these factors play into. Make sense to everybody? Okay. So again, going to this notion of what keeps us up at night, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. Has anyone in this room never heard the term social determinants of health? Okay, that's a win. That's a big win, because I think our students get it, but sometimes when I do continuing education, it's like a novel concept to people, right? So one of the things that keeps me up at night is social determinants of health. access to care. How do we get there? How do we improve? So if you're not as familiar, social determinants of health are those conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age. It's like life, generally, right? Life happening. What's really sad about this to me, and this is a figure from the City of Boston Health Department, because I like the way it plays it out. So we want to get to ideal health outcomes, right? So the research shows that 55 to 65% of getting to good health outcomes is actually based on these social determinants of health and not what we do as healthcare providers. Some research now shows as much as 80% of health outcomes is predicated on these huge system things that we likely individually can't change. And so for me as a clinician who still practices but also teaches, that is extremely frustrating. How do we make a difference? How do we change things with that? And so what keeps me up at night is not only social determinants of health, but in yellow, and forgive me if you're colorblind, but in yellow is these root causes of these issues, right? So when we talk about sexism, when we talk about homophobia, when we talk about even ableism, I would add ageism to that, right? They're all the isms and opiates, you can make a list, but all the root causes that affect our systems of care delivery, right? That's what keeps me up at night. That's what is distressing for me morally. And I'll shift gears just a little bit to name oppression specifically, right? All manner and forms of oppression. So sexism, racism, all the isms, right? This is work from the Commonwealth Fund that talks about advancing racial equity specifically in the US healthcare system. Deep-seated racial and ethnic health disparities persist across the US, even in states with otherwise high-performing health systems. Our indigenous humanity kinfolk, American Indians and Black Americans, die at significantly higher rates from preventable and treatable causes than members of other racial groups, right? Why is this important? Why is this distressing to me? Well, one, because like race is sort of manufactured and made up, right? Like I don't know if you're aware that both social science and basic science say that genetically we are basically 99% the same, irrespective of what racial category we fit in or don't fit in, right? But the problem is the racism and how that plays out in the system, right? So I wrote a paper that just came out with a good colleague by the name of Lisa Simon, who many of you may know. She's a physician and dentist, not an oral surgeon. She actually was a dentist and then became a physician after she practiced dentistry for a couple of years. And that QR code will take you to it. It hasn't come out in print yet, but it's available online, where we challenge ourselves, right? We challenge the profession to say, if our moral compass, if our instruction is to do good and refrain from harm, then how do we ignore oppression? How do we ignore that sexism still operates? How do we ignore that racism still operates? And we offer some recommendations for what to do and how we can engage this work and how we can move forward. But when we talk about something from a leadership perspective that is distressing to me, this is where I land, right? How do we fix racism within dentistry and dental practice and healthcare if we can't fix racism as a whole, right? Like, I don't want to wave a magic wand and pretend that like we can come up with all the solutions, because racism exists like outside of us being able to make a huge difference, but that doesn't mean we do nothing, which I think is, if we're honest, where we sort of land sometimes, right? I think we're also honest that this is just uncomfortable, right? Like, I get it. My mother-in-law is a white, Midwestern Polish woman born and raised in Ohio. She's been married to my Black father-in-law for 49 years. When race comes up around the dinner table, she is still uncomfortable. And so I've been married to her daughter for about 15 years. So I didn't ask this year one, right? So let's start there. I got a little more sense than that. But eventually I asked her, I said, why does this make you uncomfortable? And she said, well, Carlos, like I was raised like not to see myself. It's not like I was raised to see myself as white. Like I was just raised. Moreover, I was raised that these kinds of conversations are impolite. You don't talk about these kinds of things, right? Even though she's been married to a black man for 49 years, it's still uncomfortable for her. And so I think that's one of the things we have to level set and recognize. This might be uncomfortable, but that discomfort is okay, and we likely enter from different vantages into the conversation. As a minoritized person, I was saying this last night to some friends, I don't remember a time where I didn't recognize that I was black, even as a 4-year-old. Right? Living in a gated community, raised around mostly white folks, educated folks, I don't remember a time where I didn't recognize that I was different than most of my peers, right? It's not necessarily that way for those of you that are white because you're just existing, you're just living, right? And so we enter the conversation already from these huge different vantages that sometimes keep us in our corners versus kind of coming together and say, hey, how can we work this out? How can we figure this out so we can actually solve access to care? And I'm pretty much at time, but I want to say this really quickly too. One of my fears was access to care in the conversation, even when we talk about representation, right? We talk about we want to diversify the workforce. There's some good work being done in medicine with Stanford University, where in Oakland, they specifically gave black male patients black men cardiologists, right? So when we talk about concordance and racial concordance of provider, which I think is a great goal, right? But some of the challenge with it, if we're honest, if we can have a little bit of a family conversation right here, is I think one of the challenges for me is then it puts the onus almost solely on minority providers as if they're supposed to fix it, when it's not a problem that they created, that any of us created. Right? But it's a problem we have to solve together. What's interesting about that is they saw a 20% improvement in cardiovascular rates in those male patients, down to specific things like the notes were more thorough and robust. The treatment recommendations were more thoroughly explained and thus more often accepted. So compliant patient, right? Because of that racial concordance. So I think that's a model that we can think about, but I think it's complicated and nuanced because we can't just say, oh, well, we'll just have more Hispanic dentists and then we'll fix the Hispanic access to care issue. That's ridiculous, right? And it's not solely their responsibility, it's a collective responsibility that we have. So shifting a little bit back to moral distress again, what are some strategies? I don't want you to say, well, Carlos, you just talked about this doom and gloom, how do we improve? I think we have to have collective effort to actually want something different than the status quo, and I'm not so sure dentistry always does. If I can just be honest. I don't know that we want anything different than what we have. Don't boo me down, but I'm just not sure that we want a different system than what currently exists, or we would have maybe fixed it already. I don't know, right? So some personal actions you can take to combat moral distress wherever your environment is include clarification, communication, taking a break maybe from chairside, bedside, a resolution to the event, self-care. Then there's some external things you can do like ethics debriefs and bioethics consultations and peer mentors and mediation and all that good stuff. But I think, again, we have to really think about it from the systems perspective and say, hey, let's have a real conversation. Let's really put our resources where our articulated commitments go. I think often we have articulated commitments that aren't matched with resources, so they stay lofty goals that just kind of stay out here, and we can talk about how lofty our goals are, but then we actually never have change. Maybe? I don't know. Okay? All right? So that's my time today. I know that might have been a lot. I know it might have not been what you expected, but I'm hoping it can be the start of a real conversation to say, hey, we want to envision a world where access to care and these issues of oppression are not as rife as they are today, and we have to take steps to do that, and I think we can do that together. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Carlos. That was fascinating. When you're up here, you can see everybody's attention span and who's on the phone the whole time, who's on the phone every 5 minutes, who's asleep, and who's paying attention. And you're all paying attention, so that's the high praise for you. All right, our next speaker is Dr. Janet Sutherland. Janet, thank you so much for talking to us about this challenge of managing influence peddlers, wherever they may be.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to stand on this side of the room for a little while, mainly because most of us are right-handed. And so we all go to the right. I'm intentionally coming to the left so that the folks over here can turn this way and you guys can actually look directly at me. I'll go center some of the time. But I think that this topic that I brought, what they told us was we wanted to talk about the dark side of leadership. So I went dark. This is not an easy thing. We all in this room believe we are the pinnacle of ethical behavior. We want to be that person all the time. We aim to be that person all the time. But having been a leader and in leadership roles now for close to 30 years or more, what I can tell you is we all have to have a reality check. And that reality check is, yes, we want to do the best, but sometimes that's not always possible to get the outcome that you are seeking. Yes, it is easy to sit out there and me sit over here and say, man, I wouldn't have done it that way. I could have done it differently and it would have been easier and I would have gotten a better result, but that's not true. So this title, Effectively Collaborating with and Managing the Influence Peddlers in Academia. Now, mind you, I am not taking myself out of this. I am also one of those people. Because when you become a leader and you move up higher and higher in this echelon and get more to the executive level, you have to learn how to do this and how to do it well and not alienate people because they're different or they think differently from you or they look differently from you. You cannot make those assumptions if you're going to be effective in your role. And so I'll begin with influencers, influence peddlers. What are they? What is meant by this? Typically is not used in academia. It is used talking about one's influence to gain advantages about and influencing favor, preference, treatment. It really is a form of political corruption and is used for exploitation and power, to gain power. Those people who are technically called influence peddlers, they use their influence or try to gain it for themselves, for others, or to get privilege. And so when we think about this, we say, well, you know, that's not me. I don't do those things, but we do. We do them as individuals. Anybody ever call a friend, say, hey, you're doing this thing, and I need this thing. Can you help me with it? How many have done that? Picked up the phone, called your good friend, said, hey, I know you do this. Can you help me out with this? I don't know this person. Can you introduce me to help me get this done? Sure we do. Groups. This is a wonderful group. The ADAE is a wonderful group. We do great things, but we also use that to get things done and to accomplish goals and to make things happen in the landscape. Organizations, universities, nonprofits, we all do it on a larger scale. And we're part of these organizations, all of us, different types. When you're talking about academia, though, you look at who are those influence peddlers within those organizations. Your administrators, those people who are the dean, Who are the chancellor? Who are the vice chancellors, vice deans? All of them. Alumni. How many of you love your alma mater? I do, and I'm sure all of you do too. How many of you, as alumni, have called the dean or called the institution to tell them about something you didn't like they did or you heard about? Go ahead, raise your hands. I've done it. Tell me that you have not, you don't like the decision that was made. You think it should be done better in a different way. I know you have. You can be shy. You don't have to tell who you are.
I get a lot of calls.
Corporations. Corporations do it all the time. Especially lobbyists. What are they? What do they do? That's their main job. Donors, sponsors. When I give a big donation and give my money, do I expect something back from that? No. Folks give a couple $1 million, don't expect anything from that? Sure you do. We all do. Legislators. As I've moved up this leadership change, I've gotten calls from legislators. Hey, got a good kid applying. The governor wrote a letter in the admissions committee. Many of you that serve on a admissions committee, when you see that letter in that packet, do you look at it twice, or you just look at it like the rest of the folks that came across your desk? You don't, because those things you have to kind of pay attention to, whether you want to or not. Faculty, students. Everybody has a favorite student. I have some of them out here that I've taught and worked with. Favorite students, faculty. We have favorite faculty, deans in the room. So again, influence, how we use it. We have it. We use it all the time. And sometimes we don't even really think about it. We just do it. So why we do it? Why? Need for financial support, especially in academia and stability. State funding is constantly being cut and pulled back. You have to find a way to make this work. Tuition and fees do not cover, regardless of what the students believe, cover the operations of a university. Donors. We need donors to fill the gaps for the things we need to do. And research funding. Research funding doesn't cover all of the research that's done. That has to be subsidized in order for it to be accomplished and done well. Rankings and prestige. That's how we get more money in universities. We get more money by our rankings. We get more money by saying, I work at Harvard. I tell people I work at LSU. It's the same thing as Harvard. It's just in the South. No different. And we do it for advantages. The things that we need, the things we want to accomplish, that's why it's done. So the most common areas is impacted, and I've touched on that a little bit. Admissions. Admissions is a bear when you're talking about influence peddling. People come out of the woodwork sometimes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
To make this process work in their favor. Leadership. Being a leader is not always easy, and it's not always easy to get to. Many people aspire to become leaders, but sometimes you have to have some level of influence peddling to make your way up the train, because for every position, there's probably about 30 people who also want to hold that role too. So how do you get to be the one that's selected to do this and do it well? And so policy sometimes will drive this, as well as products and equipment. If you're in the dental profession, then there's a lot of vendors and people that support us when we do what we need to do. And we need them to be successful, to help our patients, to train our students. That's a very important piece. So again, I'm going to skip that one. Potential solutions. Because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Everybody in here knows what I'm talking about. This is a complex and challenging discussion and thought. It is kind of like an elephant in the room. We all do it. We have to in order to achieve some of the more loftier goals. When Dr. Smith talked about, social determinants of health, you're talking about a group of people who don't have a lot of resources. So where are those resources going to come from that we're going to use to improve their outcomes? You have to leverage these things. But there's a fine line between being an influence peddler and selling your soul to gain. And it's more selfish and internal. So we have policies and protocols to make sure that we kind of stay in the gate and we don't go too far left or right when we're trying to accomplish these very lofty goals as leaders. Training is very important to help people understand, especially for new leaders, that everything that glitters is not gold. And money should never be the end goal for what you're doing, especially when it comes to health and healthcare. And then maintaining a code of conduct. How do we conduct ourselves? Well, many of us have very different components to our personalities. We're one person that you're looking at, but we're made up of many, and many personalities. And so we have to have a barometer which says, this is how far I will go, and this is how long I will do this. And then you have to engage with those individuals who are like-minded and will also come in the trenches with you and help move this forward. So I'm going to end with this in saying that we're all influence peddlers, but the difference between us and maybe some other folks is corruption is not what we're looking to do. What we're looking to do is make a better way, a lot of times, for those who we serve, which is our students, our faculty, our communities, and ultimately our patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, very much. So I now have the challenge of following three great presenters. So let's see how this goes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So I'm going to also go down the pathway that could lead to moral distress of the question of what do you do when you recognize that you don't belong where you work? And how do you handle that? And that's a tough thing for all of us to have to confront if we're willing to have that conversation with ourselves, if we're willing to look in that box and go down that rabbit hole, because we know it's going to be uncomfortable, right? But when you do, what might you see and how might you react? William McRaven said, leadership is hard, but it's not difficult. It's simple. And there's nothing you're going to hear on any podcast or any stage between now and the end of your careers that hasn't been written about or talked about for hundreds of years. We teach our dental students to go out and practice well, and yet we know that every day dentists don't practice the way they were taught. And it's no different with leadership. We have people who, there are 100,000 MBA students right now in the world. lots of people getting taught how to do leadership well, and they don't follow the rules. So it really is quite simple, but leadership is really hard. One of the reasons is because a lot of times we think leadership is management. And I would argue that management is about the easy stuff. It's about processes. It's about the stuff that's really, really easy to measure. And you can be a good manager and a terrible leader, and vice versa. Leadership is hard because it's about the stuff that's really hard to measure. It's about feelings. It's about having people come together to do things that are bigger than themselves individually. And they only do that with discretionary effort at the highest level, which is about feelings. So when you think of the places that you've worked before, and you even think about the word work, work implies effort to do something that you wouldn't like to do. There's actually a negative connotation to the word work. I'm going into work as opposed to I'm going into the place where I love to be every day. Okay, they're different things, right? But if you're a leader and you can create an environment where these kinds of feelings are felt by the people that you're working with every day. We talked about trust. That's come up how many times this morning already? It's the first one. Trust, loyalty, love. I don't mean romantic love or sexual love, but that love for your fellow man, that love for the mission, that love for making the world a better place. Respect, courage, etc. If you worked in a place that had these feelings inside you and everyone else, my gosh, you couldn't wait to go in every day, right? You flip this, and you have words like this: mistrust, fear, anxiety, loneliness, judgment. You're done. You are not going in and giving the best version of yourself, and it leads to many of the problems that we've talked about this morning, whether it is burnout, for example. My colleague Elizabeth Carr sent me a quote recently where she said something like this. The quote is, "Burnout is not working long hours and being exhausted. Burnout is working long hours for a mission you don't believe in with people you don't like."
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you think about that, right? When we're into it, we're into it. Time goes quickly, the energy is given willingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
That's well said.
Yeah.
So I think organizations are defined by 6 things, okay? And one of them is what the organization chooses to punish. Another one is what it chooses to tolerate, accept, encourage, celebrate, and cherish. This is what defines us as individuals, but also in our teams and in our organizations. And if you're working in a place that cherishes what you would punish, or vice versa, you're in the wrong place. And there's lots of reasons we justify or rationalize why we're going to put up with this. We need a paycheck, children don't want to move them from their school. There's lots of things, right? Lots of pressures that then make it almost like we are going to work in spite of ourselves, not because of ourselves. When we think about these 6 boxes, one of these boxes in particular, I would argue, is the worst place to live in. And that is the box of tolerance. Mm-hmm. Because tolerance is the only one of these words that is either not action-oriented or does not have a negative connotation. This is where you are spending energy to put up with something. So in life in general, if you can take yourself from tolerance and move yourself either to saying, I'm just going to accept this and be at peace with it, now the negative emotion goes away, or you're going to resolve this issue or punish it, resolve it some way so that you're not putting up with it anymore. Now, there are times when you have to tolerate something for a while, but you don't want to live there for a long time. That's hard. Those conversations with yourself at night are the worst. So I have this 2x2 box plot I'd like to share. On the y-axis is employee values. And for a minute, I want you to look at this slide as if you are the owner of a practice, the leader of a team. You're asking yourself, do my employees' values match what the rest of the team is trying to achieve, our goals? And on the x-axis is productivity. Does the person work hard or not work hard? We're all looking for the person to work with every day that matches us. They're coming to work for the same reasons, the same core values, and they work super hard. That's the green square. The person in the black square may not be a bad person, but their values just don't match where we're trying to go. They have different goals, different reasons for coming to work. but their productivity is low, so you tend to have the conversations with that person around their productivity. And you give them opportunities to improve, performance improvement plans, whatever you want to call them. And if they get better, great. And if they don't, you let them go. Graciously, generously, kindly, respectfully. But for the sake of the mission of the team, you let them go. This person is a bit of an enigma. This person has the values, but they're not that productive. And you have to ask yourself if this person is someone that you want to keep or let go. And I would argue, if people aren't rowing against you, there's a benefit to keeping them. Okay? In my experience, working with people who have the right values, or the values that match, they can move. They may not move quickly, but they can move. They may not get all the way over to the edge of the green square, but because they care enough, and with the right environment and encouragement, they will improve. This is the person that kills every team. Okay, this is a person whose values do not match, but they're working so hard, you don't have the guts to let them go. So I'll just run through a few scenarios with you. Well, who's going to do the work if this person's let go? The other members of the team are not going to be happy for extra work. How long is it going to take in this day and age to find someone who's going to be interested in this position? How long will it take to train this person? And even if we train this person and go through all that work, will they be as productive as the person I have now? So you create all these reasons, right, for not making the hard decision. But in the long run, it will impact your team negatively. So I ask you to look at this slide as if you were the boss. Now I want you to flip this around and ask yourself, where are you when you're the employee? Because I went through this about 4 or 5 months ago. I realized that for my employers, where I was working, I was in the red square. And that's why I got let go from my position. Trust came up. Core values came up. My leaders, the people that I reported to, did not feel that I was in the green square. They believed that I was in the red square. And so they exercised their right and said, we're moving on. But it really does make you stand back and look at this model that I used to teach just from the employee point of view very, very differently. So it's a conversation you have with yourself. What would you have had to have done to be viewed in the green square? And could you do that and still be the person you wanted to be? And if you can't, then maybe for that organization, you'll always be a red square person. And the goal is to find another path where you're a green square person. Mijin Choi is a good friend of mine. She's the PROS program director at NYU, an amazing person. And Mijin once told me her story about moving to America and the challenges that she overcame, which are remarkable. And at the end of this conversation, I said to her, Mijin, did you ever worry about failing? And she said something very profound that I carry with me every day. She said, Sri, I don't fear failure, but I fear regret. So these decisions around, do I belong, do I not belong, they're really questions for yourself of what do I want to do, but what would I regret doing or not doing? Most of us regret the things that we don't do. Most of us do not regret the things that we do, right? We're actually glad that we tried them. We're happy that we tried them. Living with the regret of not doing something is a bad regret to have. So again, for me, for all of us, when you're trying to decide if you belong or don't belong, maybe one of the fundamental questions is, will I regret staying here or will I regret moving on? And choose the path of least regret. This is a statue that sits on the banks of the river Saône in the French city of Lyon. And in Lyon, the Saône and the Rhône rivers merge, and the Rhône trundles on down to the Mediterranean. And this statue actually sits outside the courthouse. And it's a statue of a man carrying the body of another man, right? Mm-hmm. Except it's not. He's carrying his own body. Mm-hmm. And the name of this statue is the weight of oneself. And at the end of the day, almost all of the challenges that we face on the dark side relate to our inner conflict of who do we want to be, what judgments and expectations do we place on ourselves in wanting to be somebody, and are we in an environment that allows us to be that person? And the bottom line is that some environments are not the right environment. But you have to go and try and have no regrets, because if you don't go and try, you'll never know. And you'll meet some amazing people and do some good things along the way. So on behalf of the three speakers that I have, my colleagues here and myself, we're very grateful for your attention. We hope you've enjoyed it. We've hoped it's sparked some things, not just up here, but hopefully right here as well. And the floor is yours. What questions would you like to ask us? Who's got the courage to ask the first question?
You want us to stand?
Yeah, let's all stand.
Are there mics?
There are going to be mics, yeah. Let's all stand up so that we can take the questions. Our first questioner. We're looking for
have a
Mike.
question.
Courageous.
I'll maybe speak loud so you all can hear me. First of all, thank you, all four of you, for your incredible presentation. Just really thought-provoking. I can just tell in the room everyone was reflecting on what you're saying. My question is, and you all touched on this a little bit, the importance of how the leader shows up and presents themselves. In college, we talk about leadership and talk about excellence, professionalism, and integrity. So when a leader lets their guard down and they drop their level, whatever your role is, whatever leadership position that is, what's the effect on the entire organization when you're on stage essentially as the leader?
And that was my question.
And it was a good one.
I'll let you repeat it.
Actually, yeah, go ahead, repeat it.
You want me to repeat it?
Yeah.
Now I have to remember what I said. So my question was, when a leader lets down their guard and they drop the level of their performance, and aligning it with the college's values, what's the ripple effect through the organization if suddenly you're not holding yourself to as high of a standard, whether it's ethics or professionalism? It may be a reaction to something because folks, whether you like it or not, you're on stage as a leader. What do you see kind of related to the dark side? How does that affect everybody else's decision-making in the organization?
I think can you stop?
I think we're all on.
I think one of the things that comes to mind is when a leader does drop, you'll see the performance also of the people around them drop, and the morale. And that's a big deal within the organization that you're in. That once the morale starts being impacted in the culture of what's being built, and usually the leader is kind of at the pinnacle of that, you start to see changes in how people feel, how they react, how they perform, the quality of the work that they do and outputs. So I think as a leader drops, and that's what happens, what you see in the landscape sometimes, is this turnover. And it's not always a smooth transition. It's just an abrupt change. And that abrupt change usually is kind of caused by just what you suggested and talked about, is that if that starts to drop in the barometer on that, then there's always somebody you work for. Like Carla said, there's somebody, everybody's working for somebody, and it's kind of a domino effect. So if that leader is starting to lose traction in their role, in their influence, then it will impact the organization as a whole, and it becomes apparent.
So, yeah, well said. Nader, I think the leader is the chief morale officer for the organization, right? And we all have personal and professional challenges as leaders, right? We deal with them. I think that from a personal perspective, I work very hard not to show when I'm having a bad day, all right? But I will tell you, every now and then, I let my guard down, and you used the perfect term. I let my guard down, and it's whether it's my gait, whether it's my stare, whether it's me walking down the passageway, having my head down like I'm thinking, people pick up on that cue very quickly. And I've had people come and say, hey, everything okay? So when somebody in the organization comes in to the chief morale officer, right, and says, hey, is everything okay? It's a snap back to reality. Because I really do feel that as the leader of any organization, it's really hard to have a public bad day, all right? Because the organization feels it, and they react either positively or negatively to that feel that the leader's having a bad day. And there's those folks on your quote-unquote inner circle that'll come up and they'll put their arm around you and they'll go, hey, you know, you need to take a deep breath here, or you need to step back, or you need to take care of yourself. You value that close inner circle on your personal team that tells you, hey, you know, you're sending the wrong message here, Doc.
I think I would just add, you know, I think it depends on the habitual nature of this drop, as you call it, right? I think people in general are far more intelligent than we typically give them credit for, whether that is patients, students, colleagues. So I think things are palpable within an organization in terms of if you're talking about a key leader's shifts or lack of congruence with mission and that leader's actions. So I think people generally want to extend grace, right? But I think when it's habitual and those things don't align, where what is being articulated is the opposite of the action, I think when that becomes the rhythm and the pattern, that's when the morale drops, and that's when you've kind of lost potentially your footing, if you will. But I think if the leader is authentic, generally speaking, before there's this down step or lapse or whatever, then I think people are generally forgiving. But I think if it's a day in, day out, where things are not aligning, then people begin to lose that trust, and it begins to be an environment where I think folks often may say, okay, I'll do all the good I can while I'm here, but I'm not overextending myself in this space. Yeah.
So thank you. You all could take a road show together if you find any time that you can do this more often. So this is to Dr. Smith, and you've got me in a position of moral distress right now. I think it's as a leader, as you watch who you're around, if you see somebody that you might judge now, given the terms that you've given me, that their whole life is just sitting in a place of moral distress, what is my obligation? The hubris we talked about and stuff, you know, it's just like, who made me the person, as I observe this, to go to that person and try to help them make decisions? And it might be, you know, leave this job or something, but what's my responsibility as a leader when I observe something that definitive? What's my responsibility to go do something about it?
So I think proximity is important, right? What kind of relationship you have with the individual that you're observing. I think the more proximity you have, the more license you have to kind of speak into either the good you see or the challenges you see. I think if you don't have that proximity, there can be a wall or a guard up that, if we're honest, is like our sensibility to just be self-protective and self-preserving, right? So they may not hear your advice, they may not heed it, right? So I think you might want to back up and evaluate what kind of relationship do I have with this person to kind of call them to the carpet, as it were, or speak into the areas that I may see as challenges or opportunities for the person. I think absent of some sort of relationship, that's a really hard conversation. Because then we're all products of our environment, right? There are things you may not know, and I'm not saying you have to become a psychologist to that person overnight, but I think if you have more proximity and adjacency to the person, there's relationship there that you can lean into and an authenticity you can lean into, versus if that's like a stranger, or you may decide, hey, I see this, I'm gonna cultivate relationship here, right? And so it may not be day one that you speak to something you saw or observed, but it may be day 10 once you've cultivated that relationship. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's helpful. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. This is one of the best meetings I've ever attended on ethics for ACD, so I applaud all of you. Thank you. Thank you for your solutions. I've experienced one of the worst board meetings in my life last year, and talk about dark leadership at that time. It took me about a year to synthesize what had occurred, and we created a code of ethics for our young members and mentees, my mentees, to actually be safe in our board meetings. Also, many of us in this room have also experienced poor leadership and also harassment in board meetings as well. So I looked at the professional ethics and continuation CE. People here in New York actually helped California to make that regulatory change to have the state board to actually adopt it for license renewal. We now have 19 states that actually have adopted that, and I want to applaud these 19 states. They are Alabama, Arizona, California, District of Columbia, Georgia, Hawaii, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Washington. And we've now asked ADA to move Resolution 521, to move it forward so that the remaining 31 states follow suit and actually have their members invest in professionalism and ethics CE to make their organization stronger. I am so proud of being part of ADA and ACD, and I want to thank you all.
I think that's the positive part of influence peddling.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know you're in a service organization where the president is the one running the mic. Isn't
That's
that
right.
Thank you, Bob.
He's doing a good job.
Yes, I had actually a comment for the Admiral. I'm a former Coast Guard, so I'll call you Admiral.
Thanks for your service.
Anyway, thank you for your service. The affiliate thing, the style that you talked about, does everybody know who Eddie Reese is? Eddie Reese has won 14 national championships in swimming at UT. That's University of Texas. But anyway, he taught me something many years ago, which really changed the culture of my practice when I was practicing. And that is, he says, every day to each one of your employees, say something positive to them. And once I started doing that, I mean, just, Ramona, you really had a great presentation, the way you handled Ms. Smith. Just something that simple. It changes the entire, and so I think you can achieve that by just that one comment.
Yes.
The question I have, that was just a comment, but the question I have is, we all have friends that are leaders that have a lot of turnover, and we know why. We can see the way they treat their employees, that authoritative type of style. As friends, how do we talk to them? Or do we, well, we want to talk to them, and I want to talk to them, but I don't know how. So how would we do that?
Boy, those are really difficult conversations. And, you know, I'll draw on some of my Navy experiences where many people in the organization were my friends, right? You know, after 30 years of service, you make a number of friends. And I would distinguish a little bit between friends and acquaintances, right? We all have many, many acquaintances. I have very few close friends. I have a number of extended friends, but very few close friends. I would think that it would depend on your relationship. If it is and it's a hard conversation, crucial conversation, right? It's a very hard conversation. I would say that my very close friends, I can have those conversations a little easier than I can with an extended friend or an acquaintance. You do put the friendship at risk. It's very hard. And there are people that will say, well, if you can't have that conversation with a really close friend, then maybe they weren't a close friend at all. I think it goes a lot to how you approach it. You know, we all have those conversations where we try to find the positive in every engagement. And there are positives in every engagement. I mean, everyone brings something to the organization. I would say that if you would probably at some point, depending on your relationship, have to pick whether it's, again, this is just my opinion, whether after the conversation, do you want them to be a friend, or is that going to damage the relationship? Is it more important for that person to know their effect on their part of the organization? I would submit to you that it is, because they are influencing many more people than you are. You're influencing with them. If it's a true friend, a close friend, they should take that with some degree of receptibility. They should be receptive to that. But you do put the friendship at risk. My thoughts. Colleagues?
I think I would say one of the things that kind of helps you manage those relationships is setting expectations. And if you do that up front, you can lead and you can follow. And that's what I tell my direct reports all the time. I don't expect to lead all the time, because I don't always have all the answers. I think that's the mark of a good team, is that there are certain people with certain talents that are able to lead as well. And so being able to discern when those talents are needed and setting those expectations up front, then it makes it easier to have those difficult conversations about what maybe didn't happen or you didn't do. One of the things I've done in all of my roles that I've been in, and in this role as well, is every meeting I have, at the end of the meeting, everybody has to tell me one positive thing that has happened and they have achieved that they are proud of. And so again, creating that environment where people feel comfortable, regardless of whether or not you have to have difficult conversations, you have that. They're going to always be uncomfortable, but I think once you set those expectations and people know where you're coming from, then it makes it much easier.
And just to follow on to that is, you do have to set an environment of openness and the willingness for people to come up. I mean, you do have to be receptive to people telling the quote-unquote emperor when they don't have any clothes on, right? And, you know, I think back to personal experience. I was in command in Okinawa, and I came to work, didn't have my collar devices on, right? Everybody in the military knows when you come in without your collar devices. The XO saw me, the DFA, Director for Administration, saw me, Mickey, my executive assistant, saw me. Nobody said anything to me. And then one of the petty officers, you know, one of the junior enlisted, came in about 11 o'clock. He goes, "Hey, Skipper, you don't have any collar devices on." I'm like, "Oh!" And I looked at the XO and the DFA, and I go, "Why didn't you all tell me that I didn't have my collar devices on?" Yeah, you have to be approachable. And again, that's a learning thing. So, but you do, and that's why I go back to the type of friendship and the type of relationship. I seek input from our leadership team at the school. Because, you know, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Gina's heard me say this. I didn't grow up in academics. I grew up in executive and organizational leadership. Learning academics for me has been a journey. And I'm not embarrassed to say that I have to really work hard at it with the people that do. And they have to tell me when I'm misstepping. Somebody's got to say, "Doc, you're off course here. And this is what's going to happen." So setting a work climate of being approachable is really important. So I know that expanded a little on your friend comment, but I think that's an important part of large organizational leadership, recognizing what you don't know and setting a tone and tenor in the command for people to approach.
Yeah. So I would just say, as a continuation of that, so I have 3 girls. They're 9, 7, and 3, right? So in first grade, in these days, they teach something called executive functioning skills. I was baffled, right? What we used to call soft leadership skills, right? But they call them executive functioning skills. And in first grade, they are taking them through a journey of having a growth mindset versus a rigid mindset. And I mean, it was so beautifully put to them. I even told their teacher, I said, can you come to the dental school and do this for our faculty? But my point is, we all have different types of friends, and some of our friends have a growth mindset and some of them don't. And so I think to Steve's point, like, you've got to evaluate, is the person open to your advice? So that's one. And then two, it may not be just a one moment in time, it may be nuggets you drop along the way. To say, hey, have you seen what Johnny's doing with his staff? This is so great, they did this, they did that, they did this. Have you ever done anything like that? Or have you ever taken your team to do this kind of thing? And so you might show some compare and contrast of how they're treating their team versus someone else, not in a blame or accusatory way, but in a way that maybe a light bulb might go off with some nuggets you place along the way versus one moment in time where you say, you're really a jerk of a boss, right? Like, that's hard. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
And I would say you do need to ask, the big question is, are they teachable? Yeah, because if they're not teachable, you're wasting your time. And then maybe you have the conversation to make yourself feel better, but you're not actually planning on them being any better. Because they're not teachable, right? So you have different motives. But I will tell you that most people know that they have high turnover. So you're not telling the person something they don't already know. So then you have to ask, well, if they know that and they still have high turnover, what is the reason why, right? And again, those could be things that could be changed, and they could be things that maybe the person just accepts high turnover because they don't want to pay their employees very much.
Yeah.
You know, and they've made that business decision, unfortunately. So it could be nuanced, yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Good morning, Lavette Henderson, out of Maryland, honorary member. It was a great session, but I have a question for each of the panelists. Coming from a background working with different organizations and their leaders, and being one of those leaders and working with other leaders around the table, you see that there's a problem or a situation going on, but the leaders around the table are not really standing up to do what they need to do because they are afraid of the trust, that they may lose with another leader. How would you say that you need to have that conversation? You know it's something wrong, but other people within the leadership style doesn't necessarily want to say anything and they just let it ride out. And I've seen this over different organizations, different ethnic backgrounds. So if you could just give a statement, not anything too long, but a statement how you would handle that situation.
That's too long. You want to start with?
Janet?
Oh, I get to go first. Okay, I'll go ahead and start and not be too long. And I think one of the things is really being comfortable in your own skin, okay? We have our own biases. We know what types of things we like, we don't like. And we see that we're not going to get along with everybody, and everybody is not going to get along. But I think approaching anybody who you're having some challenges with, or they're having challenges with other people, is one with empathy and compassion. Is trying to put yourself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from first. Because you don't know what you don't know they're dealing with, or what experiences they've had. So you approach them in that manner. Secondly, is not in a public forum. I won't tell you. You may have to watch it play out, but once it's over, it's maybe pulling that person aside and having a conversation with them that really is not threatening, not accusatory, but asking, what is it that is causing you not to really understand or not be amenable to what we're trying to achieve as a group or as a team? And sometimes you'll be surprised at what the answer is. And sometimes people don't even understand what's going on sometimes. And you may even have to explain to them what's going on and what it is, what you're arguing for. I had people pull them aside and say, oh, is that what we were talking about? Is that what we're trying to do? So I think not being judgmental, but always looking for an opportunity to look for the greater good and a better path forward.
I would just say, I think if we're honest, we all are almost constantly negotiating relational currency, right? So what I mean there is, like, if you've got all these different groups of people around the table and people are trying to figure out, do I speak up? Is it this? What's most important? I don't want to offend here. I don't want to be misperceived. So I think that's something we constantly, particularly if you have a lot of different types of people around the table. So that's something to just think about, right? And in a way extend grace, because sometimes the way people are negotiating that currency is just differently than how you would do it, right? But I think if you can center mission, whatever the mission is, whatever the goal is, if we can get back to mission, then sometimes we can absolve some of those personality differences. If we're all at the table, then I would hope on some level we've got the same mission of fill in the blank in mind. So if we can go back to mission, maybe that can help you navigate some of those challenges. But those are the two things that come to mind to me. Like, everyone negotiates that relational currency differently. It doesn't make it bad, good, or indifferent. It's just we all may do it differently. And then if we can all agree to some center mission, then no matter the personality, no matter how I broach it, no matter my perspective, if we've agreed on this mission, then let's get back to the mission at hand.
Yeah. Just to build on both of those, one, keep the mission at the point and the center of the conversation. And as Janet said, individually, don't do it in a large forum. We've all been in meetings where people have called out 3 or 4 people in the group, and that does nothing good. Nothing ever good comes out of that. And when you're one-on-one, find the positive. We've all heard this, Leadership 101. Find the positive that they're doing, because everybody brings something positive to the organization. And then build on that positive. Yep, that's going well, but did you think about, fill in the blank? So in private, mission-focused, find the positive.
So there's a quote by Alexander Den Heyer who says, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows. You don't fix the flower. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's a great quote, and it's very much sort of encapsulates what leadership is about.
It's an amazing.
But there are flowers that like a lot of sunshine. There are flowers that like a lot of shade. And so again, it's back to that, not everybody fits in every environment. But to get to your mission, you might need a mix of different kinds of people in terms of their skills.
Yes.
But their commitment to the mission has to be unwavering. So I'm very lucky. I've worked at 2 world-class organizations. I've worked at the Mayo Clinic and at MIT. And these places are different. And they're different because the mission always comes first, and they have found this magical way of allowing individuals to be successful, but never compromising the mission. Everybody wins. So I'm coming back, it's a long answer, but now you're back to the role of communication and team building in accomplishing a mission. It's the most important thing, right? So again, your conversations with people, I think, are around how do we become the best team that we can be to achieve our mission? And what behaviors do we need to either enhance or change in order to get there? And there will be times when people, it's not their cup of tea, it's not a change they're willing to make, and then that compromises the mission. The mission always wins.
And I just one final word on that. I don't remember which chief of naval operations it was. I think it was Roughhead back in the 90s. He got approached in a public forum like this. So what's more important, people or mission? And he had an answer which I still keep in my pocket for occasional use. It's mission first, people always. So did he dodge that? I don't know.
That was a good dodge.
That was a good dodge. Mission first, right? When you think about the mission of warfighters, I mean, you have to get the mission done, but people always. So,
okay, thank you.
Okay, hey, I have a quick comment and a question. One of my favorite books is actually an old one on leadership. It's called All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And so, Carlos, I appreciate your story because I think there's a lot of lessons, and I'm glad your daughter's learning early in her academic career to play well with others. But so the question is, I love the topic, the dark side of leadership. And I guess in my leadership roles, one thing I've learned is that humans are fallible and we all make mistakes and we don't always behave as impeccably as we might like. And so I'm just curious, in the toolkit of life, where does forgiveness fit in? And is there ever a time where you should not forgive somebody for something that didn't go well?
Well, I'm going to answer that one by saying you must always forgive, okay? You must always forgive. Forgiveness is the key. Love is the primary key, but forgiveness is also part of that process. Now, in that, you may not you may forgive them, but you may not forget. We're humans, like you said, we're fallible. We don't forget things. We're not like elephants, but we don't forget a lot of things, especially when we're injured or offended. And so forgiveness helps us kind of let go of those offenses and helps us continue to move forward. Because not forgiving, I think, keeps us in the mire. It keeps us living that event, that offense, over and over and over again. And so forgiveness, empathy is the other piece of it. In order to forgive somebody, you have to kind of be empathetic to what they are, who they are, and what they're dealing with. And so I think that forgiveness always, and I'm going to leave it at that, because what I know is if we don't forgive, we find ourselves in way worse positions and in worse circumstances.
Carlos? So, that's a really, that's a hard question.
I'm sorry. Especially for a reverend.
But I think it's a profound question, though, right? And I think I'll try to get to an answer this way. I'm debating on how transparent to be here. So, when you are the offended party, you carry it. 9 times out of 10, the person who offended you or who wronged you or mislabeled you, whatever that is, they've gone on about their business. They're not thinking another thing about that incident or what has occurred, right? So something happened with me. I've been an associate dean for about 3 years, and there was a comment from a colleague when I first became associate dean that my dean needed to be careful that I did not just become a dean for black students. And I remember thinking, ooh. Like if I was Jewish, would there have been commentary saying there needs to be this carefulness of who comes to seek my help, assistance, advice, and all kinds of students come to me, right? Ethnicities, religions, whatever, most of the time because I'm relatable, I think, is why they come to me and seek me out. But I remember thinking, that is such a profoundly offensive and racist notion that I would only be here to offer help to a student that looks like me. Like, why would I'm here because I want to help everybody. And so that accusation really had me a bit paralyzed for a bit, because it's like, you actually don't know anything about me, that would be the kind of clause you would put out. But then I was consumed with that thought. I was consumed with, if I see this person in the hallway, do I speak? Like, I'm just being honest. Like, do I say good morning when I know these are the kinds of things that you've said, right? But again, that's eating at me. That person's not thinking anything about it. And so you have to come to the point where I forgive, but I'm still aware, right? Like, I'm not an idiot, right? I forgive, and I'm still not gonna necessarily put myself in a position to where I'm vulnerable with that particular party, if that makes sense. I've moved on, I speak, we can have nice conversation, we can have idle chit chat. We don't really talk about anything in depth because I know what you really think of me, right? But I forgive. and move forward. But again, I think there's always an awareness. And I think if you're gonna lead, you have to be able to do that. The hard part is not being jaded or bitter towards that party, right? And making sure you extend grace to that party for their expertise, what they bring to the table, how you negotiate life moving forward with that party, right? So it is difficult, but to Dr. Sutherland's point, I think you do have to forgive, but I would just add, I'm still aware.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say
Can't follow that.
that some people are not easy to forgive.
Yeah.
They're not. But that's okay. It is okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, Carlos. You all nailed it. But I think you do have to extend forgiveness, but you'll never forget, right? And if there was an accountability piece for the action that you need forgiveness, you have to hold people accountable. You can't lose the accountability thing and the accountability piece. And I'll tell you, in the organization, people know what the leader needs to do. And they know, whether or not you think they do, they know what needs done, and they're waiting on you to do it.
So let me be contrarian and say, I don't think there's certain things that you can forgive. Okay. Cruelty, injustice. When people intentionally do things that are cruel and create harm, I have a really hard time forgiving that person. I'm sorry, I guess I'm not that loving, but I don't have enough time for the people in the world who are good people, let alone, right? So yeah, I don't know if it's, but I just move on. Like I'm done with them, and it's a really bad trait at times, and I have to work on that.
So let me add to that in saying that I can forgive. I can even sometimes try to forget, but that does not mean you won't lose your job.
Yeah. That's the accountability piece. Yeah. That's the accountability. There are consequences.
That's
the accountability.
That you still must hold to the code of conduct and ethics and professionalism that is required in these spaces. So yes, I do forgive you, and I hold no grudges or anything against you. But again, you may not be a good fit. And some people will take that personal. But again, you have to do what's best. Mission, people always.
I think it's important too, not to dwell on this so long, but I get really uncomfortable with ascribing intentions to people. And I really try hard not to ascribe intentions to folks because we really don't know. And so I'm saying that because people can display cruelty, right? But I get hard pressed that their intention is to be cruel, right? Or their intention, even we all know bullies in the workplace, right? Is their intention to be a bully? I don't know. And sometimes that may be, but I think then we get so caught up in what they did or didn't do, or if they meant it. And I have too much to do than to spend my brain space and bandwidth on somebody else and what they meant or didn't mean and carry that kind of offense. So that's why for me, the forgiveness does come in, but again, I'm aware, and I just think that's important for us to recognize.
You're a better person than I am, Carlos.
Around the intention.
I mean, if somebody's cruel to an animal or a child, I can't do it. I can't forgive.
So I just want to say this is probably the last question because we have to exit around 11 o'clock. So that 11:30 is the convocation lunch, and they have to turn this room over. So we have this as the last question, if we can do that in a succinct way. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Pam Alston, and thank you so much for your presentations. And I am the lead oral health specialist for the U.S. Department of Labor Job Corps program. There are 125 Job Corps programs throughout the U.S., and they tend to be located in dental professional shortage areas. And it's hard to attract dentists, but when they do, they attract the most compassionate dentists you'd ever want to know. But over time, sometimes the oral health team will start complaining about the dentist, whose behavior is becoming unprofessional, uncaring, And Dr. Smith, you mentioned compassion fatigue, and I think that is what it is. You said one of the antidotes is self-care. Can you talk more about self-care?
Sure. I think you have to do things. So conversations about burnout, resilience, mental health, it is a both and, right? This question about mission or people is I don't think it was a cop-out. I just think there are things in life that are both and not either or. And so it's got to be mission and people. In the same way around compassion fatigue and burnout and all those things, we have to have personal things that we do, but there have to be systems practices that improve as well. So a lot of times we like to talk about like chair yoga and all these kinds of different things. You can do as much yoga till the cows come home, but if your work environment is toxic, that yoga is not gonna fix the bully or the mean person or the cruel person, right? So we have to attack both things. There has to be things that I can do individually for self-care and personal evolution and cultivation of good practices, and developing the Institute for Healthcare Improvement calls it Joy at Work, which is just fascinating to me as a resource. But then there have to be systems change as well, right? So it can't just be, which is hard for us as dentists, it can't just be individualized interventions, right? It can't just be floss more. Like there has to be the systems piece as well, and those two things have to work in tandem together. And I know we're at time, but I just want to say too, back to the forgiveness part, this is also work, like for me. So like there's a lot that I can leave, I can compartmentalize and say, look, yeah, I forgive you, and yeah, you might still be a jerk and mean and oppressive or whatever the situation is, but I got 3 kids at home that I'm concerned about. I got this, I got parents, I got community, I got this other stuff. And so I'm not spending my days and nights worried about, because I can't fix you, right? So that's another reason the forgiveness to me comes up. Like, it's still work at the end of the day.
Okay, we are going to call it, or else we're going to get yanked off the stage here. But what I would like you to do is please show your appreciation for these amazing speakers today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robert. Good to see you.